So after I did that breaking news talking about FC Dallas is going to withdraw from the MLS's back tournament, it's time for the first time in 4 months to do the preview of actual games that is going to be happening in less than 48 hours. And I like how right now on social media, everybody is freaking out about this tournament and say that MLS should clearly cancel this tournament. Well, again, as I said before, and I'm going to say it again, in a logical world, I think MLS might be thinking about reconsider about this tournament and probably delay or just pull the plug onto it. But since we're less than 48 hours away from the first game being kicked off between Orlando City versus Inter Miami in this tournament, I just think we're just getting to a point where there's really no turning back for MLS, and that they're not going to pull the plug in this tournament with less than 48 hours before the first game is going to kick off. And most importantly, I think this is something I didn't mention, but it's very important for people to know, is that there seems to be a little bit of a conflict reports of how those FC Dallas players got tested positive with that virus. Some of them saying that they got tested positive before they actually arrived from the bubble, and that some say that they got tested positive when they were in the bubble. We're not quite sure how did that actually work out. And then the other most important factor that I think people need to consider is that there is no evidence right now saying that this bubble that MLS is trying to do is not working in terms of containing this virus, and that there's right now an outbreak going on in this bubble that MLS is having this tournament in. And until we get to a point where if there is evidence that this bubble is not working and players are getting tested positive left and right, and this virus seems to there seems to be a bit of an outbreak in the bubble, I just don't see how MLS is going to decide to cancel this tournament. I mean, everybody can continue to complain about it, but at the end of the day, we are going to have games, and that in less than 48 hours. The first game is going to be kicking off in this MLS is back tournament, and it is going to be the first ever Florida Cup or Florida Derby, depending on, I honestly haven't heard anybody actually come up with a rivalry name for Orlando City versus Miami. I'm just going to call it the Florida Cup or the Florida Derby, since both of these teams are in Florida. But yeah, this of course is the first ever meeting. This game, by the way, is going to be kicking off at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. Both of these teams in their first two games, Orlando, of course, drew 0-0 to RSL in their opening game before losing 2-1 on the road against the Rapids. While Miami, of course, they lost 1-0 against LAFC, but that was a hard-fought loss that they unfortunately suffered. And then they got very unlucky against DC United, where at one point they were leading 2-0 in the game, but unfortunately they got that goal ticking off and also suffer a bit of a double whammy with Roman Torres getting sent off, and ultimately lost 2-1 against DC United. And also, I forgot to mention, I'm not going to put prediction with these videos. So I know this season I started to do prediction in terms of what I think is going to happen and which team is going to probably win, or if this is going to be a draw. I'm not going to do it for this video, because this preview is pretty much something similar to the first preview that I've done, where there's just so much unpredictability that is going to be happening in this match day. But I think this is even more unpredictable with the way that none of these teams have even had a preseason or any competitive game to prep for this tournament, and that everybody's going to be playing competitively for the first time in 4 months, and we don't know how fitness is going to look like. And we also have the unpredictability about some of the games. Are they actually even going to be kicking off? Because as I'm going to be mentioning the next game after I do my preview about this game, that is one of those games that is going to have a little bit of an uncertainty. And knowing the fact that FC Dallas, of course, have been withdrawn from this tournament, there's also an uncertainty of what's going to happen with the Vancouver Whitecaps, because throughout this preview, the only team I'm not going to talk about is the Vancouver Whitecaps, because they were supposed to play against FC Dallas, and since they are not going to be playing against FC Dallas, since they of course withdraw this tournament, who are they actually going to be playing in their first game of the group stage? So that is still to be determined in terms of what MLS is going to do in terms of trying to figure out a way to realign the group so that the group will be as even as possible, knowing the fact that Group B now only have 3 teams. But going back to this between Orlando City versus Miami, again, this is going to be a very interesting kind of game, and it's going to be very interesting seeing players actually playing for the first time in 4 months and playing kind of in a soccer complex. Like, I know I'm very used to watching games playing in a soccer complex since, I do Sports Hop series, and most of the Sports Hop series video is happening in a soccer complex. So I'm used to that, but I know for some fans that don't go to their local soccer complex to watch these lower leagues are probably going to be feels this is going to be very odd, and it kind of almost feels like this is going to be like a preseason tournament than actually a tournament that is going to count toward the regular season. Although, again, that is still to be determined with the way what's going on today with Dallas withdrawing this tournament, and whether or not if they're going to repeal that rule where if a team does get points in this group stage, we don't know if that is now not going to count toward their regular season. So, yeah, with that being said, moving on in terms of the next match, and I also forgot to put the timestamp for the first game, so I'm going to have to go back when I edit this video to look at where I talk about this Orlando City versus Miami game. One more thing to note about this game is that Robbie Robinson, he is not going to be available for Miami, as today he announced that he decided to not participate in this tournament for family reason. And again, as I said many times before, I have no problem of any of these players decided to opt out of this tournament if they feel like they are gonna have to face this gauntlet of potentially contracting this virus, and that I fully respect their decision on that. But that being said, moving on in terms of the next match is the game that I talked about how it is going to be a big uncertain, because right now we still don't know whether or not if this game is going to be postponed or actually is going to be played, knowing if one of these 2 teams might be the prime candidate to replace FC Dallas in Group B. But this match, of course, as I said, could be postponed, mainly due to the fact that Nashville have 5 players tested positive, and that Nashville could potentially join FC Dallas as another team to be withdrawn from this tournament. The first 2 games, Chicago unfortunately lost a heartbreaker against the Sounders 2-1, and then they drew 1-1 against New England. While for Nashville, they lost 2-1 in their first ever MLS game against Atlanta, and then they lost that hard-fought 1-0 game against the Portland Timbers. But obviously the big storyline about this game is we don't know if it's actually going to happen. Like, there's no guarantee the fact that with the way when they do realign stuff, and that eventually I'm going to get news talked about how they're going to realign the groups after FC Dallas decide to withdraw from this tournament. There's a big possibility that this game actually will not be happening, and that it's not just because Nashville has 5 players that is tested positive for this coronavirus. But moving on, in terms of the next game, is NYCFC versus the Union. So this is a game that will be the first one that is going to be taking place in the morning. Yes, during this tournament, there is going to be morning game, and for those of you wondering why exactly there's MLS game taking place so early in the morning, is because, Orlando during the summer, it's hot and humid, and they're definitely avoiding to try to play games during the middle of the day or even in the afternoon, and hence that's why these kickoff times are a little bit strange with the way that, there's games kicking off at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, and that there actually is going to be some games that is going to be taking place to the very next day and play past midnight because they want to avoid the heat and humidity that is in the Orlando area. So this game is going to be playing in bright and early morning. And in terms of the last 5 head-to-head between NYCFC and the Union, well, NYCFC seems to be the more dominant side since they have won the last 4 head-to-head, as they won 2-1 against the Union in their last meeting. Then they won 4-2 against the Union. They had a pair of 3-1 wins before the Union did win 2-0 against NYCFC. I'm not quite sure why I put the Union there. Yeah, the Union is so bad at this head-to-head that they actually even won against themselves and at the same time lost against themselves. But this is obviously part of the fact that this is the first time I had to do so much in terms of writing on the board, and mistake is going to happen in terms of when I put things on the board. In fact, I can actually fix this right now. Yeah, I can fix this. to make it a little bit more credible. Yeah, so this is the only game that the Union actually won against NYCFC, and that was like 5 matches ago when both of these teams played against each other head-to-head. Now, for NYCFC, we know people are making fun of NYCFC by saying not only the fact that they haven't got a point, but they haven't scored a goal in this season yet. They had a pair of 1-0 loss, first losing to Columbus on the road, then losing to Toronto on the road on the second game before everything was shut down. For the Union, they lost 2-0 against Dallas on opening day, but they were involved in that crazy free draw against LAFC, where fortunately they took the lead 3 times in that game, only to be pinned back 3 times by LAFC. But still, a good result against a team that usually do not drop points at home, and a team that usually don't give away points to their opposition. So yeah, this should be a very interesting kind of game, and that I said before in the prediction, I think this could be a game where it could definitely decide who potentially can finish first in that group, because both of these teams are very, very good team, and that I expect them to potentially finish 1-2 in its group, and that this could be a decider of who actually can finish top of Group A heading into this tournament. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be the Montreal Impact versus New England Revolution. So this is a rematch of the opening day fixture this season, as this game is going to be taking place at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. The opening day fixture between both of these teams end up with a 2-1 win against the Montreal Impact. Then they drew 0-0 against each other before Montreal winning 3-0 against New England. New England did win 1-0 against Montreal, but Montreal won 4-2 against the Revs. So just like NYCFC kind of had a little bit of a dominance over Philly in the last 5 head-to-head, Montreal seems to have New England numbers in the last 5 head-to-head matchup, as they won 3 out of those 5 meetings. For Montreal, of course, they won 2-1 on opening day against New England before drawing 2-2 against Dallas in a match that I feel like they should have won that one, with the way that they had a 2-0 lead heading into that game. For New England, they of course lost 2-1 against Montreal on opening day before drawing 1-1 against the Chicago Fire in their opening home fixture of 2020. And yeah, we shall see how this game is going to take place. Obviously, you know, on opening day, New England was very unlucky on opening day. Like, they score looked like the winning goal in that game. I actually forgot who scored that winning goal in that game, but then literally a couple of seconds later, I think it was Urruti might be the one that scored the winning goal for Montreal. Tajon Buchanan also hit the post from close range that could have equalized for New England late in the game, and that game could have easily end in different ways, with the way that how there was some VAR decision that kind of unfortunately got on against New England, and that Montreal took full advantage of that. So be interesting to see how this game is going to take place. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be TFC versus DC United. So this is the rematch of last year's first round matchup in the Eastern Conference, and boy, this was a rematch of a very memorable game. Although if you're a DC fan, I don't think that was very memorable, more than it was an absolute embarrassment. So this game will take place at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time, and that memorable playoff game was the game when TFC won 5-1 against DC United. And at first you think that's what is so memorable about that game, with the way that it seemed like TFC just completely dominated DC in that game. Well, what was so memorable was that Toronto had a 1-0 lead heading literally to the last kick of the game, and then DC of course equalized in that game to force extra time. You thought they had all the momentum in the game, only to concede 4 goals in extra time. And I think that is probably the first time I've ever seen a team score 4 goals in extra time, both in MLS or even in a soccer match. Like, I've watched a lot of extra time match throughout my life, but I have never seen a game where a team can score 4 goals in extra time, and the way that TFC just completely blow DC United away. And that what's even more shocking is the fact that DC tied it up late in the game, and that you thought for sure that they had all the momentum, and that it was just false hope in many ways of that. But besides that match, they drew 1-1 in the previous game before that playoff game, then drew 0-0 against each other. DC did win 1-0 against TFC before we had that memorable 4-4 draw between both of these teams, where DC were up 3-0 against TFC. Then TFC scored 4 unanswered goals before DC scoring another one late into stoppage time to salvage a 4-4 draw. So this is a fixture that either could have a game that is just completely crazy, or it could be a game that not really a lot of things could happen. For TFC, their first 2 games, they unfortunately drew 2-2 against the Quakes in a game that they probably should have won when they were up 2-0. And then they, of course, won 1-0 against NYCFC. For DC, they, of course, lost 2-1 against Colorado, but did win 2-1 against Inter Miami. And obviously for TFC, I'm not quite sure if Josie Altidore is going to be fit enough for this game. I think he's just started to get back with his team and start doing full training after he had to self-isolate himself for 14 days from coming back to Canada from Florida. So yeah, I think he probably won't be available in this game, and that should be kind of interesting to see how TFC is gonna look without Josie Altidore, and that maybe DC can take advantage of this heading into this game. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be the Seattle Sounders versus the San Jose Earthquakes. Now, I know this is a Group B kind of match in the first day of group stage, but this one, I don't think it's going to be effective because, I think both of these teams, even though they're in Group B, they're not really going to be even if FC Dallas is still in this group, I don't think this game is going to be effective whatsoever. Now, what is going to be effective is the Quakes, and how their next game is going to be against FC Dallas, and we know that is not going to be the case anymore because FC Dallas have withdrawn from this tournament. So, be interesting to see who the Quakes is going to play in the next match, and that, Seattle, they do play against the Whitecaps in the next match, but again, for the Quakes, is it going to be get them just getting a bye in the next round, or are they actually going to play against a team from Group A, whether it's going to be Nashville or Chicago, if one of those two teams is going to be taking place of where FC Dallas was in Group B. But this game is going to be kicking off at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. In the last 5 head-to-head match, I'm aware that Seattle has got our numbers, but here's the thing about the Quakes. In all these matches, except maybe the 3-0 loss against the Sounders back in 2017, all these matches were pretty competitive, and that we had a shot in terms of winning these games or getting a result. I mean, last year, we did lose 1-0 against Seattle, but that game probably could have ended 0-0 if it wasn't for Jordan Morris scoring a late goal in the 94th minute. Then there's the 2-2 draw against the Sounders, where the Quakes should have won that game if they didn't blow a 2-0 lead on the road. They lost 2-1 then in the previous match against Seattle. Then they lost 1-0 against the Sounders again before losing 3-0 against the Quakes. Now, for the Sounders in their first 2 games, they of course won 2-1 against Chicago, as they of course actually scored a late goal to get all 3 points in that game. Then they drew 1-1 against Columbus. For the Quakes, they also scored a late goal, but this time they were able to score the late goal to salvage a draw against TFC. And then we know the disaster that is against Minnesota United, where they lost 5-2 in that game. So, yeah, for me, I think for the Quakes, this might be a throwaway game for them, because we know for a fact that the Sounders are probably going to be heavy favorites in this, and that I know for the Quakes, coming into this tournament, I know the first game might be a throwaway, but the second and third game might be the one that we could potentially get something to move on into the next round. But I won't mind if we are able to cause a bit of an upset. And that, again, since this tournament, since everybody hasn't really played a competitive match for almost 4 months, just because you're a team that could be heavy favorites in terms of this game and that you might have more quality than your opponent, doesn't mean the fact that you're absolutely guaranteed to get a win. Like, even the most quality team, since they haven't played in 4 months, they're going to be very, very rusty, and they're not going to be really at its best. So maybe the Quakes can take advantage of a Seattle team that might not be at its best with the way that they have been off for so long now. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be Atlanta versus the Redbulls. So this game is going to be taking place at 8 p.m. Eastern time, and actually put the wrong timestamp there. But yeah, this game is going to be taking place at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. Last 5 head-to-head matchup, we had that crazy free draw between Atlanta and the Redbulls last time, before the Redbulls, of course, winning 1-0 against Atlanta. Now the previous match after that was actually a playoff match in the conference final, and that the second leg matchup, the Redbulls were able to win 1-0 against Atlanta, but Atlanta did win 3-0 against Redbulls in the first leg, and that is the reason why they move on into the MLS Cup in 2018 and eventually winning the whole thing. But before that, the Redbulls were able to win 2-0 against Atlanta, and really, when you look at this fixture, this has always been a fixture that, for some reason, always favored the Redbulls, no matter how good Atlanta has been. Like, barring what happened in that Eastern Conference final, they have had a very good history against Atlanta United, and that for Atlanta, this seems to be the one team that they just don't like to face against. But obviously, we know for a fact that this match will also, there are two things that could also play a different factors into this match. Obviously, for the Redbulls, they're definitely not going to be as strong as the previous Redbulls team that have beat Atlanta in the past season. And Atlanta, obviously, without Joseph Martinez, be interesting to see how they are going to play. And that, as I mentioned before, Ezekiel Barco and Pity Martinez, they need to step up for this team if they want to get this team deep into the tournament, or at least make it through the next round of the group. Now, in the first two games, Atlanta, of course, won 2-1 against Nashville, but that was the game when they, of course, lost Joseph Martinez of a torn ACL. And then the second game, they were able to win 2-1 against FC Cincinnati. For the Redbulls, they won 3-2 against FC Cincinnati before drawing 1-1 against RSL. So both teams have kind of got off to a good start to the season, but again, with the way that I know both of these teams will be missing some of their key superstar in this game, either due to injuries or they're no longer being there anymore, it will be very interesting to see who can shine through in this game and who could potentially get the crucial 3 points heading into this match. But finally, moving on into the last game on this board, before I'm going to switch the board to look at the last 4 games that's going to be taking place in Matchday 1 of the MLS Is Back tournament, is FC Cincinnati versus Columbus Crew in the Hell is Real derby. And this is going to be a late night Hell is Real derby, as it's going to be 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. I know some people are not happy the fact that this Hell is Real derby is that late, especially the people in the East Coast, and Cincinnati and Columbus fan will have to really pull a late nighter in terms of watching this game, but I understand why they decided to put Atlanta and the Redbulls in the prime time spot, because as much as I know the Hell is Real derby is definitely getting the hype, I think Atlanta versus the Redbulls have always been a rivalry that seems to be very, very heated, and that both of these teams just doesn't seem to like each other, and that there's always some crazy things that happen. So that's why they decided to move it to that game. And also, by the way, this game is going to be on the Big Fox, while this one is going to be on FS1. But as I said, this is the third Hell is Real derby, with the first 2 games being the first one. Well, the first one was Columbus and FC Cincinnati played to a 2-2 draw, before Columbus absolutely dismantling their Ohio neighbor by winning 3-0 on the road against FC Cincinnati. For FC Cincinnati, it's been a pretty rough start so far in the first 2 games, as they lost 3-2 against the Redbulls, then losing 2-1 to Atlanta. While Columbus, they're kind of getting off to a good start by winning 1-0 at home against NYCFC before drawing 1-1 against the Seattle Sounders. But obviously, for FC Cincinnati, I know even though they got off to a rough start this season, you know, now the fact that they have a new head coach, and that some of these players that they have signed the off season are started to kind of understand have been there for a little bit longer, although they'll probably still need to kind of understand what exactly the new head coach Yat Stam is going to do. I have no idea how FC Cincinnati is going to look in this game. And, you know, I know Columbus will definitely be a team that's going to be heavy favorite in this because, as I said, they are a team that have a very good starting 11 that I think people don't realize that. And they are considered my dark horse heading into this tournament. So, yeah, I think Columbus could be favorites in this, but I know for a fact that FC Cincinnati would really want to get on the board in this Hell is Real derby and want to get their first win against their Ohio neighbor, the Columbus Crew. But that being said, I am now going to change the boards and look at the last 4 games that is going to be happening on this first match day of the MLS is Back tournament. So now we're down to the last 4 games of this preview, and all these games are Western Conference game, but most of these games is not going to kick off until 1 week from the day I record this video. And this is also kind of the other reason why I decided to not do prediction as part of the preview, because from here to when these games going to kick off a week later, a lot could change in terms of how each team is going to be. We could either have players in the worst case scenario getting COVID-19, or we can have players that basically say that, you know what, I'm just going to opt out of this tournament because I don't feel safe whatsoever. And that can really change the dynamics in terms of how each of these game plays. And in fact, that's kind of is the case for all of these matches where, you know, if you have one of your star players either decided to not play in this tournament, decide to opt out, or the fact that they got tested positive and that they're not going to be available for at least 2 weeks or so, then this could really create a bit of a problem and definitely will slash these teams that are favorites to win this tournament chances to potentially move on into the next round. But that being said, moving on into the next game is between SKC versus Minnesota, and we already seen that one of these teams is going to lose their star player. And for the Loons, of course, I know Ike Opara will not be participating in this tournament, not because he decided to say that it's unsafe for him to play this tournament because he's worried he's going to get this virus, but it's more like he had some injury issue that was kind of hampering him, and he's not going to be playing throughout this tournament. And with Ike Opara not being there, that has significantly weakened that defense of Minnesota, and that now they're going to have to face against an SKC team that we know for a fact that they are clicking on full cylinder before the pandemic happened. As you know, they really look very good in the first 2 games, albeit, yes, the first 2 games they were playing against weaker opponent like Vancouver and against not Minnesota, actually. It was actually Houston that they beat here. They, of course, won 3-1 on the road against against Vancouver, and they won 4-0 against Houston at home. While Minnesota, you know, they also look good in the first 2 games by winning 3-1 on the road against Portland, and then that 5-2 win against the Quakes. But again, like I said, without Ike Opara, that could definitely be a bit of an issue, and especially 2 of those 5 goals that Minnesota scored against the Quakes was from Ike Opara from the header. So not only he's a good defender, but he can also score some key goals on the set piece. Now, in the last 5 head-to-head matchup in this, some people call this the Dylan Whopper Derby, we saw Minnesota win 2-1 against SKC, and I believe that was the game when we won that one, and that we actually clinched our first ever playoff appearance. We did lose 1-0 against SKC when we played them on the road. Also, I want to mention that I do not include U.S. Open Cup in the last 5 head-to-head match, and I know that Minnesota did win 4-1 against SKC in the U.S. Open Cup, but I decided to exclude that and only puts games that are in league plays. Then SKC, of course, win 2-0 against Minnesota before winning 4-1 against Minnesota. Then Minnesota, of course, drawn 1-1 against SKC. But before that, this was a Minnesota team that definitely was one of those teams that is not a decent team in the league, and kind of like they're kind of like a bottom feeder in the league, and a team that always had problem in terms of defense. And fortunately, again, because we lost Ike Opara, who is our key defensive pieces, we might potentially have the same issue heading into this game. So yeah, we shall see how it's going to go and whether or not I'm hoping for the Loons if they want to move on into this game. Maybe a draw in this game would do it, but I'm pretty sure Peter Vermees, knowing the fact that Minnesota backline is vulnerable, he knows he can smell blood, and that he is definitely asking his team to show no mercy to those Loons defenders and just completely destroy them in this game. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is SKC, or actually not SKC, as I just talked about Sporting KC against Minnesota, but more like RSL versus Colorado Rapids in the Rocky Mountain Cup, as this game is going to be taking place at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. Now, in the last 5 head-to-head matchup and the last 5 Rocky Mountain Cup derby, yeah, this hasn't really been close whatsoever. And, for the past couple of years, RSL have really dominated the Rocky Mountain Cup, and that the Rapids have really struggled when they play against RSL. The last game, they were able to win 2-0 against the Rapids before winning 3-2 against Colorado. Then they, of course, put up that 6-0 beating of the Rapids the previous year before drawing 2-2 against the Rapids at home, and then winning 3-0 against the Rapids. And that the last time the Rapids actually beat RSL was just 6 Rocky Mountain Cup ago, when I think they were able to win 2-0 against RSL at home. Now, for the first 2 games, RSL got a pair of draw, with the first one being a 0-0 draw against Orlando City and a 1-1 draw against the Redbulls. While Colorado, they have been pretty decent in the first 2 games, winning 2-1 against DC on the road, then winning 2-1 again against Orlando City at home. But again, since the Rapids does not have a good record against RSL in the Rocky Mountain Cup, this could be interesting to see how they, of course, would do. But at the same time, I also think that this might be one of the most intriguing Rocky Mountain Cup that we have seen in previous year, because I think in previous year we can kind of agree that RSL had the better team heading into this game. But now, when you look at how both of these teams is going to face, and again, barring if Colorado does not suffer some major injury woes, or some players that got tested positive for the virus that they're going to keenly miss in this game, they definitely look like they're the strongest side against RSL, which is something I don't get to mention a lot about the Rapids whenever they face against RSL in this Rocky Mountain Cup. So yeah, be interesting to see how both of these teams is gonna do, and who, of course, is gonna get the crucial 3 points in this Rocky Mountain Cup. But moving on in terms of the next game, and moving on into the last 2 games, which is going to be Group F as these last 2 matchup, we see LAFC take on the Houston Dynamo, which takes place at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. And obviously, as we all know, besides the breaking news of FC Dallas withdrawing from the tournament, I think the bigger news this week, or the bigger news today, is that Carlos Vela decided to opt out of the tournament, and that he says that he wants to opt out because he feels like it's not worth the risk for him to play, and he wants to spend time more with his family, which, good for him, I respect all these players that feel like if they think that it's too risky and that they want to be with their family rather than just take the gauntlet and hope that you don't get the virus while playing in this tournament, then I fully respect that decision. Now, in the last 5 head-to-head match, now this I am going to include the U.S. Open Cup, because both of these teams actually only met 5 times if you include the U.S. Open Cup. And so far, pretty much every single game, LAFC have either got a win or a draw, although there was that U.S. Open Cup game when LAFC and Houston meet, and that it was a free draw. The Dynamo was actually able to win that one, and they were able to win that one on penalty. So that was really the only time that the Dynamo were actually able to beat LAFC in all competition. But in terms of league play, LAFC was able to win 3-1 against the Dynamo the last time. They did the same thing on the away leg when they win 3-1 against the Dynamo. Then they won 4-2 against the Dynamo before drawing 2-2 against them in their first ever meeting besides the U.S. Open Cups. And in terms of the first 2 games, LAFC, of course, got that 1-0 win against Inter Miami, which I was there to watch that one. And then they, of course, were part of that crazy game between the Union where they drew 3-3 against them. The Dynamo, they, of course, draw 1-1 against the Galaxy on opening day, but then they took an absolute beating of from Sporting KC as they lost 4-0 on the road in that game. And, you know, now that Carlos Vela is out of this tournament, and I said this before in terms of the prediction, it will be very interesting to see if those players that kind of like rope those players that are like the supporting role player for Carlos Vela from LAFC is going to really step up in this, and to see whether or not are they still actually going to be the favorites, and are they going to be, I wouldn't say as good as when they have with Carlos Vela, because that would just seem unrealistic, but at least maybe 3/4 of the just indomitable that LAFC have shown throughout throughout what happened last season when they won the Supporters' Shield. Or will the Dynamo actually take advantage of the fact that now they don't have to face Carlos Vela in this LAFC team? Can they take advantage of potentially get some points? Remember, the Dynamo is one of those teams that, even though I put them in third and didn't make it to the playoffs, I definitely will not be surprised if they do move on into the next round, because I definitely do think that people shouldn't just write them off so easily just because of the fact that they are the weakest team in that group. But I just think that they also have a good attack and a decent enough midfield where they could potentially surprise a lot of people, even though a lot of people, of course, immediately write them off when they're in that group of death. But now, moving on into the last game of the preview, is the Portland Timbers against the LA Galaxy. And I forgot to mention that Jonathan Dos Santos is another notable player that is not going to be playing in this tournament. Although, unlike Carlos Vela, he's not going to be playing the tournament because he suffered a knee injury and that he actually undergo surgery and probably will be out for a couple of weeks. And this game, of course, is going to be taking place at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time. Actually, he didn't suffer a knee injury. I think he suffered a hernia injury and that he had to undergo hernia surgery. So he's not going to be available for the Galaxy for at least a couple of weeks or even a couple of months. Now, the last 5 head-to-head matchup between the Timbers and the Galaxy, the Timbers were able to win 4-0 against the Galaxy the last time they faced each other, but then the Galaxy won 2-1 against the Timbers. They both draw 1-1 against each other before the Galaxy win 2-1 against the Timbers, and the Timbers were able to return the favor by winning 3-1 against the Galaxy. So both of these teams, you know, depending on what match it is, both of these teams definitely have a chance, have been shown that they are able to beat one another. Well, when you look at the first two games that both of these teams have played this season, yeah, it hasn't been great for both of these teams in terms of their start of the 2020 season. The Timbers suffered that tough loss against Minnesota on opening day by losing 3-1. Then they, of course, won 1-0 against Nashville, but it was a game that I said before should be a huge asterisk in terms of counting that as a win, since they were absolutely dominated by Nashville in that game. And if it wasn't for Nashville doesn't really have a true goal scorer, they probably would have lost that game too. Now for the Galaxy, they of course drew 1-1 against the Dynamo. Got to put the 1 here. Yeah, they drew 1-1 against Houston on the road before embarrassingly losing their season opener against the Whitecaps 1-0. And yeah, you know, this is a crucial game for both of these teams. And, you know, I guess for the Timbers, they probably are the one that might need the 3 points more than the Galaxy, and that they might even have a little bit more pressure to get all 3 points in this game because, you know, we know the Galaxy are pretty depleted and that they really don't. When you look at the key injuries that they have suffered from some of their key guys, it just feels like they probably might not have a chance to move on into the next round. Whereas the Timbers, they do have aspiration of potentially moving into the next round and hope to maybe even finish top of the group and beat LAFC to that. So if they're going to do that, they have to get all 3 points in this game. And that I won't be surprised if the Galaxy and Guillermo Barrios Scaleto is going to try to park the bus again and just kind of play defensive against a Timbers team that we know in the past they cannot break down teams when opposition decide to try to park the bus against them and trying to be compact against them. So yeah, we shall see how this game is going to go, but I think for the Timbers, they desperately need this 3 points if they want to move on into the next round of the MLS is back tournament. But that being said, there you have it. That is pretty much it for the preview for the first match day of the MLS is back tournament. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these games? And as always, let me know in the comments below your prediction for all 12 of these games that is going to be taking place. Now, for the review, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to try my best in terms of doing a review every single day and kind of look at the 2 games or 3 games that happen in each of the day. But I won't guarantee you that I will do that every single day, because I know for a fact that since there's games happening every single day, it is definitely going to be tough to, you know, just stay at home every single day to watch these games, because, you know, I need to go outside and kind of take a breather on a little bit. And although, you know, that kind of time usually is reserved between 12 o'clock when I woke up to about 5 o'clock there are some times where I think I'm going to fortunately be out a little bit longer and won't get back until like 6 or 7 o'clock. And when I feel like doing those time when I don't get back in time to watch the first primetime game of that day, maybe I will think about postponing that review, and I'll just do like 4 games for the very next day instead of just doing a review right after the final game of that night is going to be. But I'm going to try my best in terms of trying to do a review for every single night, and that the only reason why I'm doing this is because I do not want to have a circumstances where at the end of the first match day I have to do 12 different reviews. I mean, that I remember 2 years ago, or I think last year, I tried to do that, and boy, I was burned out every time when I had to do that much review in a single video. And the video was just super long too. Like, it was almost 75 or 80 minutes, which that's almost like a length of a movie with the way that some of these video was. And I really don't like to upload that long of a video, and I know a lot of you probably will not stick an hour or long to just watch the whole video. But also, that is the reason why I started putting timestamp in my description, just to give you guys, you know, if you want to like just hear your favorite team, of kind of my takes of how your favorite team did in that match, and just kind of hear my take of the review of the game that your favorite team is involved. That's why the timestamp was actually taking place. So that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.